Hey friends, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. We're diving into one of the most beautiful and heartfelt stories in the Bible, the Book of Ruth. It's not a long book, just 4 short chapters, but it's packed with meaning. It's about love, loyalty, faith, and how God works quietly behind the scenes when life feels uncertain. Think of it like one of those slow, emotional movies that doesn't have explosions or superheroes, but still leaves you smiling at the end because it's so real and human. The Book of Ruth opens during a tough time in Israel's history. There was a famine in the land. A man named Elimelech took his wife Naomi and their 2 sons from Bethlehem to the country of Moab, hoping for a better life. But tragedy struck. Naomi's husband died. Then, years later, both of her sons died too. All that was left were Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. Naomi decided to return home to Bethlehem, brokenhearted. She told the 2 young women to stay in Moab and rebuild their lives. Orpah tearfully said goodbye, but Ruth said something unforgettable. She told Naomi, "Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." That one moment, that one sentence, is the heart of Ruth's story. It's a picture of love that doesn't walk away when life gets hard. Ruth had every reason to go back home. She was young. She could have started over, met someone new, and lived comfortably. But she chose loyalty over convenience. She chose faith over comfort. Ruth didn't follow Naomi because it was easy. She followed because it was right. You know how sometimes your GPS says, recalculating, when you miss a turn? That's kind of what God was doing in Ruth's life. Even though it looked like everything had fallen apart, God was quietly rerouting her towards something better. When Ruth and Naomi reached Bethlehem, they had nothing. No income, no security, no husband to provide. So Ruth started working in the fields, picking up leftover grain after the harvesters. It was hard, humble work, but it kept them alive. And then, in a classic God moment, Ruth met Boaz, the owner of the field. Boaz was kind, respectful, and he noticed Ruth's character, her work ethic, her loyalty, her compassion. He made sure she was protected and cared for. He told his workers to leave extra grain for her. He spoke to her kindly, making sure she knew she was valued. In a world where widows were often ignored, Boaz showed respect and honor. That's huge. It's like when someone takes the time to really see you. Not just scroll past your post, but stop and care. Boaz saw Ruth's heart before anything else. And that's when things started to shift from survival to hope. If this story happened today, imagine it like this. Naomi's the older woman who's lost everything. Her husband, her home, her security. Ruth's the young woman who says, "I've got you. I'm not leaving." They move back to Naomi's small hometown. Maybe they're staying in a tiny apartment, sharing takeout, trying to figure life out. Ruth starts working long hours at a local grocery store or maybe a coffee shop, just trying to keep them both afloat. Then she meets Boaz. Maybe he's the manager or the owner. Not flashy, not famous, but kind. He notices her integrity when nobody else does. That's what real love looks like. Not drama, not a swipe right situation. Just quiet, consistent care and character. And in all this, God is working behind the scenes, putting people together, restoring what was lost, and preparing something amazing. Eventually, Naomi encourages Ruth to talk to Boaz more directly, kind of like saying, "Hey, let him know you're open to a relationship." Back then, the customs were different. So Ruth approaches Boaz humbly, asking him to be her kinsman redeemer, basically someone who could marry her and carry on Naomi's family line. Boaz is moved by her heart and her courage. He does everything properly and respectfully. He wants to make sure it's done in a way that honors both Ruth and God. And soon, Ruth and Boaz are married. Their love story doesn't just change their lives, it changes history. They have a son named Obed. Obed becomes the grandfather of King David, and generations later, Jesus is born through that same family line. So think about that for a second. Ruth, a woman from another country, someone who started with nothing, becomes part of the lineage of Christ himself. That's the power of God's redemption. It's a reminder that no one is ever too far outside God's plan. Sometimes we think our stories are too small to matter, like, "I'm just working this job," or "I'm just trying to survive this semester," or "I'm just helping someone get by." But Ruth shows us that small acts of faith and kindness can echo through generations. She didn't set out to become famous. She just did the next right thing, again and again. It's kind of like posting something encouraging online. You never know who's watching or who's being lifted by your words. God often works through quiet faithfulness, not lightning bolts or viral moments. Just simple, steady trust. And when you keep walking by faith, even when it's hard, God can take your small, ordinary choices and use them in extraordinary ways. So what do we take from Ruth's story? First, God is always working, even when you can't see it. Even when the notifications are silent and it feels like your prayers are stuck in sending mode, He's still writing your story. Second, loyalty and kindness still matter. In a world where people ghost each other or cancel when things get hard, Ruth reminds us that love means staying when it's easier to leave. Third, you never know how your faithfulness might ripple out. Ruth didn't know her story would lead to King David and eventually to Jesus. She was just loving her family, trusting God, and showing up. So maybe you're in a season of waiting, or rebuilding, or just trying to find purpose again. Take a breath, do the next right thing, be faithful in small things, because God's hand is in the details, even the ones you don't notice yet. The book of Ruth is more than a love story. It's a story about God's quiet faithfulness and our choice to trust Him, even in the unknown. Ruth started with loss and ended with legacy. And that same God is still turning ashes into beauty today. So wherever you are, whatever's going on, stay faithful, love deeply, trust fully, and know that God's writing something good in your story too. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope Ruth's story encourages you to see hope where it feels hidden. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep walking in faith.